Contrast. This is one of the most effective ways to add visual interest to your designs and to your layouts, and it's my favorite of all of the principles that you and I are going to be talking about because it's the most dramatic, it adds the most interest, it's the most exciting, really. Contrast is created when the objects inside of our layout are really, really different from each other. And you know what's interesting about contrast and why I love it so much is if you start looking around, not only at other designs, but in life in general, and you start to see contrast everywhere. You see it in personalities, you see it on television, you see it with your family members, it's everywhere. Let me use our entertainment industry as an example once again. Contrast is used in entertainment all the time to create interest and conflict, and it's oftentimes the source of comedy and drama. All we need to do is take two very different personalities and put them together. Maybe they're going to wind up working together, or maybe they're going to try and achieve some kind of an objective together, or perhaps they work at the same job, or they live at the same place. And that creates a lot of comedy, it creates a lot of conflict and drama. This is the classic tale of good versus evil, the virtuous hero contrasting or in conflict with the corrupt villain. We see it all the time. So, as far as graphic design is concerned, we can create contrast in a variety of ways, using a variety of methods. For instance, here's some food for thought. We can create contrast with dark colors versus light colors, or a large piece of text contrasted against a smaller piece of text. Or how about a big, bold font used with a small, light font? That creates visual interest, doesn't it? Something big with something small, something light with something dark, something detailed, heavy detail, with something very, very plain and simple. Okay, again, if you start looking around for it, you see it everywhere. So if items are too similar, they conflict with one another because they're exactly the same. It's kind of boring and drab. For contrast to work, it's got to be bold. It's got to be really, really different. And the bolder it is, the better it's going to work for your layouts. So here's an example that we had earlier on. And when I was looking at this example and thinking about how I would explain contrast, I realized that contrast is already being used inside this earlier example. We have contrast between the large text for the headline, let's call it, and the telephone number down towards the bottom versus the smaller text that we have inside the rest of the layout. So immediately, our eye is drawn to the headline, the invitation to the surprise birthday for John, and the telephone number, and then the other information is implied that it's less important than the information that we're drawn to right away. And this is an important concept to understand, and we'll talk about this more in just a moment. But what I'm saying here is that the most important information should be the most prominent. What is it? We're invited to John's birthday. And then the more minor information should be a little bit more subtle, a little bit more laid back. When is it? Where is it? And so on. Okay? Now, let me move over to the next example. If we take the bold text formatting, let's call it, and apply it to all the text inside of our layout, now everything is the same. And as I had mentioned just a second ago, everything is in conflict with each other. I don't know where to look first. So all of the information inside the layout that I'm given here is conflicting with one another. I don't know what I should read first. And it's making my brain work overtime to process this information to figure out exactly what it is that I'm looking at. Everything is flat. No priority is given to anything. But like I said just a second ago, we can use contrast to draw the viewer's attention. Let me show you this. I'm going to slide over to the next example. Right away, the telephone number is in contrast with all of the other information that we have inside the layout. So when I pulled this up on screen right away, our eyes went right to the telephone number. But is the telephone number the most important piece of information inside this layout? I think you would agree with me, absolutely not. So with every other design principle that we've discussed, it applies here as well. We can't just use contrast arbitrarily. We have to be conscious about it. We want to use contrast in an effective way to highlight the most important piece of information inside the layout, or the most important pieces plural of information inside the layout. So something like this. So here what I'm doing is I'm using contrast to our advantage. So contrast is being created inside this layout in two ways. It's being created by using a large, bold font and also a different typeface. I changed the typeface on the headline here. So the typeface is very different from the other typeface that's being used inside the document, and also the text is big and large and bold. So what we need to do when we're setting up our layouts, when we're building our layouts, is we need to decide on a focus. What is the most important piece of information inside this layout? And oftentimes this answers that conscious or unconscious question that the viewer is asking themselves, which is, what is this? What is this for? What is this all about? I pull this out of my mailbox and that's my first question. What is this for? Well, I've used contrast to answer that question. I've used contrast to draw the viewer's attention to the answer to that question. Again, whether they're asking that question on a conscious level or a subconscious level. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you'll be able to use this inside your own layouts. Are there other ways that we could create contrast inside this layout? Sure. How about something like this? Let me pull this over here. So all I've done is I've changed the headline to be white instead of black, and I put it on a black background. This is an even bolder way to create contrast inside of our layout. I'm not sure that I like it for this particular layout, but it's another example of what we could do. Now, it's tempting to use strong blacks to create contrast, but we don't want to overdo the blacks. If I overdo things and I wind up with something like this, now I've used too much black, and what we've wound up with is essentially a negative of what we had a moment ago. So there's contrast here, but it's not as dramatic as it was in the previous two examples. Okay, now here's the final example that I have for you, at least for this particular layout. This is the seventh example here. What I've decided to do in this example is create contrast using a variety of methods. So what I've done here is I've highlighted the most important piece of information, which answers the question, what is this? What is this for? Well, it's an invitation to John's surprise birthday, and I've also repeated the same color down towards the bottom to highlight the telephone number down in the bottom right corner. So the viewer's eye is starting here and hopefully bouncing down here and bouncing back and forth a few times. We talked about that earlier, and then they're going to scan the rest of the information. The rest of the information I've dropped back somewhat by using a lighter gray color because it's not as important for them. I want them to know exactly what this is for and what they should do. So I've told them what it's for, and I want them to RSVP, or for yourself, it could be signing up for a newsletter or checking out a store sale, or who knows, whatever the purpose of the design piece is. I included the kind of the funky design elements that we had earlier on to imply to the viewer that this is for a party, reinforcing the answer to the question, what is this? What is this for? So again, implying a party or confetti or party favors, something like that. Okay? So remember, if everything is the same, not only is it boring, but it makes my brain have to scan and look for information and work overtime to try and figure out, what is this? What is this for? Imagine a movie or a television show where all the characters are exactly the same. There's no drama, there's no interest, there's no source for comedy or conflict. So I hope that makes sense. This, in my opinion, almost looks like a mistake. Whoever laid this out, did they know what they were doing? It almost looks like they set up the text to be almost the same size, but I can tell that these sub-headlines are a little bit larger, but was that a mistake on their part? Did they mean to do that? I don't know. And again, it's making my brain work hard to figure out exactly what this is trying to tell me or exactly what's going on here. Again, to reinforce it, we can't contrast things that are really, really similar. We can't contrast 12-point type with 14-point type. We've got to make things really, really different. So in this example here, which we saw earlier, I can look at this layout, again, whether I pull it out of my mailbox or I'm handed it by someone else hands me this, my brain can scan it. I know exactly what it's all about because I'm going to see the headline. Then I can scan the subheads very quickly. I know exactly where those subheads are. And if I'm interested, I'm going to read through the body text. Okay, so bear this in mind as you're setting up your layouts. When you start looking around, you'll start to see examples of layouts where whoever created it, the creator, the designer, thought that everything should be important. And as you can see, it's just overwhelming. So I glance at this and I go, what is this for? I can pick out protect, I can pick out struggling, I can pick out Mother Earth. That's about it. And my brain literally starts to shut down and I go, get this away from me. This is too much for me to process. Here's another quick example where you just go, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on here? I don't even want to look at this. I don't even want to have to read through all this text. What is this for? Why was I given this? I can't process all of this information. So when you're creating your layouts, when you're creating your designs, try to keep it simple. Try to answer the question, what is this for? And use contrast sparingly and to your advantage, not in a way that's going to overwhelm your viewer.